Private First Class. David Keller opens his eyes to absolute darkness, and the first thing he realizes is that he cannot breathe. There is weight pressing down on his chest, his face, his entire body, a crushing pressure that feels like the earth itself is trying to swallow him whole. He tries to move his arms and discovers that he cannot. He tries to scream and discovers that his mouth is filled with something wet and frozen. And then, as his brain begins processing sensory information through the fog of unconsciousness, he understands with crystalline horror exactly where he is. He is buried under a pile of corpses. 12 dead men are stacked on top of him in a frozen mass grave in the Ardennes forest, and 23 German soldiers are standing 15 feet away, laughing and smoking cigarettes, utterly convinced that everyone in this pile is dead. They are wrong, but this is getting ahead of our story. Let's talk about what happens to the human body when it's exposed to temperatures below freezing for extended periods, particularly when that body is wounded and surrounded by other bodies. The science is counterintuitive and strange. In normal circumstances, a gunshot wound to the abdomen, combined with exposure to temperatures of 18 degrees Fahrenheit, would kill a man within 2 to 3 hours. Blood loss leads to hypovolemic shock. Core body temperature drops below 95 degrees, triggering hypothermia. Organ systems begin shutting down. The heart slows, consciousness fades, death follows. This is the expected progression, documented in thousands of battlefield casualties across the European theatre. But there is an exception, a narrow window of physiological anomaly that military doctors don't fully understand even in 1944. If a wounded soldier loses consciousness rapidly enough, if his core temperature drops quickly enough, and if he is insulated from further heat loss by external factors such as being buried under other bodies, something remarkable can happen. The body enters a state that resembles hibernation. Metabolic processes slow to a crawl. Oxygen consumption drops by 70 to 80%. The heart rate can fall below 20 beats per minute. Brain activity diminishes to levels barely distinguishable from death. From an external perspective, the soldier appears dead. No visible breathing. No detectable pulse without careful examination. Skin cold and grey. Pupils fixed and dilated. Every clinical indicator suggests death, but internally, at a cellular level, the body is still alive. It is merely waiting for warmth, waiting for the temperature to rise, waiting for the metabolic furnace to reignite. Military medical records from the Battle of the Bulge document 47 cases of soldiers declared dead on the battlefield who later revived, sometimes hours after being stacked with corpses. The phenomenon is rare enough that most field medics never encounter it, but it happens, and on January 8, 1945, in a snow-covered forest outside Bastogne, it happened to Private First Class David Keller. David Michael Keller is 19 years old, and he enlisted in the United States Army on his 18th birthday in March 1944, against the explicit wishes of his father, who survived the trenches of World War I and spent the next 25 years warning his son never to volunteer for infantry service. David didn't listen. He wanted to fight. He wanted to prove something to himself, though he was never quite sure what that something was. He completed basic training at Camp Wheeler in Georgia, advanced infantry training at Fort Benning, and was shipped to Europe in October 1944 as a replacement rifleman in the 87th Infantry Division. He arrived in Belgium in December, just in time for the German offensive that history would call the Battle of the Bulge. Keller's first combat experience occurred on January 4, 1945, when his company encountered a Wehrmacht battalion near the village of Tillet. The Germans had the advantage of terrain and numbers. The Americans had determination and artillery support. The battle lasted 14 hours. Keller's squad lost 6 men. Keller himself took a bullet through the left shoulder and a piece of shrapnel in his right thigh. He continued fighting until blood loss made him pass out behind a destroyed Sherman tank. When he regained consciousness, he was in a German aid station, his wounds hastily bandaged with German medical supplies, his hands bound with wire. The Wehrmacht had captured 38 Americans during the Tillit engagement. The Germans marched them 3 miles through the snow to a collection point in the forest, a clearing surrounded by pine trees where captured equipment and prisoners were being organized for transport to rear areas. It was during this march, on the evening of January 7th, that American artillery began shelling the forest. The shells were targeting German positions, but artillery was imprecise. One shell landed 40 yards from the prisoner column. Shrapnel tore through the formation. 11 Americans died instantly. 23 were wounded. 4, including Keller, were wounded so severely that the German guards assumed they were dead. The guards didn't waste bullets confirming. They simply stacked the bodies in a pile at the edge of the clearing, planning to bury them in the morning. They stacked David Keller at the bottom of that pile, underneath 12 corpses, and left him there to freeze. Keller has no memory of being stacked with the corpses. His last conscious memory before waking up in the pile is the sensation of being dragged through snow by his ankles, the sound of German voices discussing something in a language he doesn't understand. And then nothing. Darkness. Silence. The absence of existence. When consciousness returns, it returns slowly, like a light being turned up by degrees in a pitch-black room. First comes sensation, cold, intense, bone-deep cold that feels like his entire body has been submerged in ice water. Then comes pain. His shoulder throbs with every heartbeat. His thigh burns. His ribs ache in a way that suggests they might be broken. Then comes awareness. He is lying on his back. There is weight on top of him. Tremendous weight. He tries to move and cannot. He tries to breathe deeply and discovers that he can only take shallow sips of air. Panic floods his system. His heart rate accelerates. His breathing becomes rapid and shallow. He is going to suffocate. He is going to die under this weight. And then, with an effort of will that draws on every ounce of mental discipline he possesses, he forces himself to stop panicking. He forces himself to think. He analyzes his situation with the cold logic of a man who understands that emotion will kill him. He is buried, but not underground. He can feel air moving across his face, cold air carrying the scent of pine trees and snow. He is in a pile of something, bodies. The realization comes with sickening clarity. He is buried under bodies, dead men, his comrades. The Americans who were killed by the artillery shell. The Germans stacked them in a pile, and he is at the bottom. But he is not dead. He is alive, wounded, trapped, barely able to breathe, but alive. And that means he has a chance. Keller begins testing his range of motion. He can move his fingers. He can flex his toes. He can turn his head slightly to the left and right. His arms are pinned beneath the weight of the corpses, but there is a small amount of give in the pile, a slight compression and expansion as he shifts his weight. He begins working his right arm free, millimeter by millimeter, using tiny movements that don't disturb the pile enough to be visible from the outside. It takes 2 hours. 2 hours of patient, agonizing effort, fighting against pain and cold and the screaming instinct to thrash and struggle. But at the end of those 2 hours, his right arm is free. He rests, listening. He can hear German voices. They are close, maybe 10 or 15 feet away. He can hear the sounds of a military encampment, boots on frozen ground, the clatter of equipment, the crackle of fires, conversations in German. He can smell cigarette smoke and cooking food. The Germans are using this clearing as a temporary base. They are not expecting an attack. They are not standing guard over a pile of corpses. Why would they? Everyone in the pile is dead, except Keller. Keller spends the next hour working his left arm free. Then he begins the slow process of creating space to breathe, pushing upward against the weight of the bodies, creating a small cavity around his face that allows him to take deeper breaths. The movement is exhausting. His shoulder screams with pain, but he continues. He has to, because he has realized something crucial. Night is falling. He can feel the temperature dropping further. The Germans will sleep soon, and when they sleep, he will have an opportunity. An opportunity to do something that no one expects. An opportunity to survive. But survival, he is beginning to understand, is going to require violence. At 2200 hours on January 8, 1945, the German camp settled into its night routine. 23 Wehrmacht soldiers are ambushed in the clearing. 15 are sleeping in 2 large canvas tents erected near the tree line. 8 are on guard duty, walking the perimeter of the clearing in 2-man teams, their attention focused outward on the forest, watching for American patrols. Nobody is watching the pile of corpses. Keller waits until the guard rotation passes his position, waits until he can hear their footsteps receding into the distance, and then he begins to move. The process of extracting himself from the pile takes 30 minutes. 30 minutes of careful, silent effort, lifting the weight of dead men off his body inch by inch, sliding out from under the mass like a snake shedding its skin. When he finally pulls his legs free and rolls onto the frozen ground beside the pile, he lies motionless for 3 minutes, waiting to see if anyone notices. Nobody did. He's lying in shadow, 10 feet from the nearest fire, in a patch of darkness between the corpse pile and the forest edge. The Germans cannot see him. Keller assesses his condition. He is wounded, cold, and weak. He has lost blood. He has been exposed to near-freezing temperatures for 8 hours. He should not be able to walk, much less fight. But adrenaline is a powerful drug, and the human body is capable of extraordinary things when survival is at stake. He can feel warmth returning to his extremities as his metabolism restarts. He can feel strength returning to his muscles. It's not much strength. It's not full combat effectiveness. But it's enough. Keller begins to move toward the nearest tent. He moves slowly, staying low, using the shadows in the uneven terrain for cover. He finds a Kar 98K rifle propped against a tree near the tent entrance, left there by a careless guard. He picks it up. Check the bolt. 5 rounds in the magazine. He also finds a combat knife on the belt of a sleeping German soldier whose coat is hanging on a tree branch. He takes the knife. Now he is armed. And now the Germans are going to learn that the pile of corpses they stacked in the clearing was not quite as dead as they believed. Keller enters the first tent at 22:45 hours. 8 German soldiers are sleeping inside, arranged on bedrolls in 2 rows of 4. Keller moves down the row systematically, using the knife. The Germans die without waking. It takes 6 minutes. He exits the tent and moves to the second tent. 7 more Germans are sleeping. The process repeats. 5 minutes this time because Keller is becoming faster, more efficient, and colder in his execution. He is operating on autopilot now, his conscious mind detached from the mechanical process of killing. 13 Germans died. 10 remaining. 8 guards outside. 2 in a supply tent. Keller exits the second sleeping tent and moves toward the supply tent. This is where his luck changes. One of the Germans in the supply tent is awake, sitting at a field desk writing in a journal by lantern light. The German looks up as Keller enters. Their eyes meet. The German opens his mouth to shout. Keller shoots him in the chest with the Kar 98K. The sound of the rifle shot shatters the silence of the night. The camp erupts. Germans shouting, boots running, flashlights sweeping the darkness. Keller drops the rifle and grabs the MP-40 submachine gun hanging on the supply tent's center pole. 40 rounds in the magazine. He steps out of the tent and sees guards running toward him from 3 directions. He fires. The MP-40 is not an accurate weapon at distance, but at 30 feet in the darkness it doesn't need to be accurate. It just needs to put bullets downrange. Keller sweeps the weapon left to right, firing in controlled bursts. 3 Germans fall. 4. 5. The remaining guards dive for cover, returning fire. Bullets punch through the canvas of the supply tent behind Keller. He drops to the ground, rolls left, comes up behind a stack of ammunition crates. Reloads. The Germans are shouting at each other in German. Keller doesn't understand the words, but he understands the meaning. They are trying to coordinate. They are trying to flank him. He doesn't give them time. He charges. It's a desperate move, an insane move, but desperation and insanity are sometimes the only tactics available. He sprints toward the nearest German position, firing as he runs. The German returns fire. Both men miss. Then they don't miss. Keller shoots the German twice in the chest. The German's bullet catches Keller in the left arm, a grazing shot that tears flesh but doesn't break bone. Keller keeps moving. 2 more Germans ahead. He kills one with the MP40. The other charges him with a bayonet. They go down together in the snow, hand to hand. Keller still has the knife. The Germans don't. The fight lasts 8 seconds. Keller survives. The Germans don't. 17 dead. Keller staggers to his feet, bleeding from 3 wounds now, and looks around the clearing. No movement, no sounds, except the crackling of fires and the wind in the pine trees. 23 Germans were in this camp when night fell. 6 are still alive, scattered in the forest, running. 17 are dead. And Private First Class David Keller is walking toward the forest edge, toward the American lines that he estimates are 3 miles east, leaving behind the pile of corpses where he woke up and the bodies of the men who thought he was one of them. David Keller reached American lines at 0400 hours on January 9th, 1945. He collapses at a 87th Infantry Division checkpoint, barely conscious, bleeding from 6 wounds and weighing 32 pounds less than he did when he was captured 4 days earlier. The medics who treat him document his wounds: gunshot wound to the left shoulder, shrapnel wound to the right thigh, bullet grazed to the left forearm, 3 bayonet cuts across his torso from the hand-to-hand fight. They also document his body temperature, 92 degrees Fahrenheit, 3 degrees below the threshold for severe hypothermia. They don't understand how he's alive. The intelligence officer who debriefs Keller 3 days later doesn't believe his story. 17 Germans killed after being buried under corpses for 8 hours sounds like propaganda, like a story invented to boost morale. Then the patrol reports come in. A reconnaissance team investigated the clearing where Keller was held prisoner. They found 17 German corpses, exactly as Keller described. 13 killed with a knife. 4 killed with gunfire. The patrol also found the pile of American bodies, 12 men stacked in a frozen mass. Keller's dog tags were still on his uniform, left behind when he crawled out from under the pile. The Army awarded Keller the Distinguished Service Cross in February 1945. The citation mentions extraordinary heroism and combat effectiveness while escaping enemy captivity. Keller survives the war and returns to Pennsylvania in July 1945. He never speaks publicly about what happened in that clearing. When asked about his service, he tells people he was an infantryman who got lucky. He died in 2003 at the age of 77. His obituary mentions his DSC, but doesn't explain how he earned it. The full story didn't emerge until military historians accessed declassified records in 2009. That's when they find the after-action report. That's when they find the patrol photographs. And that's when they understand that sometimes the dead come back.